Good afternoon. It's Friday the 13th. In fact, it's Friday the 13th of August. It is a warm, sunny, if slightly blustery day. I am back in the Nook with a handful of parcels and, of course, a nice hot cup of tea. And the next one I am going to open is this one. This is the Games and Puzzles book of modern board games by David Pritchard, which was published, let's have a look, in 1975, and it's a collection of essays by several designers of board games from the period, basically from the 70s and earlier, talking about particular games, and this caught my interest because it was talking about games that I had never heard of, or at least I'd never heard of really when I first saw this book, which was in about 1980 or so, in Wimborne Library, which is where my father had moved to, so I needed a library card to go there because I was an avid reader of books back then. I still am, but basically because obviously there was not the internet, I was, the library was my first port of call for more things to read, and I would read voraciously. And I sort of had an interest in board games at the time, but you couldn't buy board games with any ease that essentially really didn't fall outside of the family board games that you would kind of see in catalogues. So like things like the Game of Life, or Kaplunk, or Connect 4, essentially Milton Bradley style games of the period. Cluedo, Scrabble, that sort of thing. There were board game publishers, but they were more difficult to find back then. And this little book was on the library, and it exposed me to a variety of different games. Games that I'd never heard of, some I had, some I knew, I would get this book out of the library multiple times over the course of a couple of years or so. And so, it deals with essentially discussing. Essentially, it says that this is writing in 1975. There is present an indoor games revival evident in both Europe and America, which shows every sign of continuing for a long and healthy life. Now, the thing is, at the time, most people would think of games. They really did think of a very limited number of board games. So you were thinking, this is in the mainstream, so it would be, here in the UK, it would be Cluedo, Monopoly and Scrabble. Mastermind as well was one that was sort of like coming out the same at that time, and it's one of the games mentioned in here. And in turn, this book discusses the different games that were really popular at the time, and some ones that sort of like, certainly that I'd never heard of. So we have a discussion of Scrabble. And Scrabble is a game I've never particularly enjoyed, but this analyses Scrabble. Okay, a lot of people enjoy it. Just how my mind works, I don't enjoy it particularly. When we go, essentially we have an article on diplomacy, that's written by the game's designer himself, Alan B. Kalhammer. So we have that familiar board of showing Europe, and about the time, it would be a few years after this that whereas I would actually get to play diplomacy, which would be in the board games club, which took place every day in the chemistry lab, and we played things like diplomacy and civilization, big games. going through, and then we get onto a game that really intrigued me, and I've never played it, which is Decline and Fall. Again, written. This is written by the game's inventor. Where are we? Terry Donnelly. Here we go. Dealing with the Decline and Fall of Rome. So it's a little bit from. I mean, the nearest thing that would have been about at that point that I might have come across would have been Britannia, which sort of does a similar thing where you have multiple waves of adventurers of essentially tribal peoples moving across and invading Rome. So just leading through this, and we have Sigma File, which was a kind of spy game, themed game of essentially of trying to basically locate a spy and locate the information they're carrying, from what I recall. And each one is really discussing sort of like how the game is played and different stages of play and the nuances. And you've got like an essay on each mastermind, which would have been sort of like the pegboard game, and you would be guessing essentially a code which the mastermind at the other end of the board would have hidden. So there we go. That's it done in a black and white form, with the different colours representing sort of like by the different sort of like tagged pegs. So that's a little bit difficult to work out. I mean, obviously a modern board game book, of which there are now quite a few because of the huge growth in the popularity of board games over the past 20 years or so, really since the invention of the Settlers of Catan. That will be in full colour and show you how it's played. For example, I mean, one couple of books, the board game book, there's a couple of volumes of that which showcase the sort of like the best selection of board games which have come out in the past two years. Twixt, Game Again, a game I never came across. Cluedo, Murder at Tudor Close, and that's discussing how that is played. So here's got an analysis on the tactics. So here's basically a map showing here's the quickest route across the different from the different rooms, because you are rolling dice to move around the board, which these days feels a little basically really feels like you really don't need to do that. And of course, here is your little sheet with detective notes of trying to work out who did the deed, who killed Dr. Black. And then we have Try Tactics. Now here, that's interesting for me. It's one of the oldest commercial board games, evolved basically, and I reviewed an earlier game called L'Attack, which came out from Gibson Games. The interesting thing is, here we go, and what you've got is little pieces like that which would stand off against the other pieces, and from that, essentially from the list of this game, what's interesting is that my father would take this and literally, because what you've got is a list of all the counters in the game, and he would create a board for me and we would play that together. This was done on heavy cardstock, which he would basically, the pieces he would cut and basically bend to be in the right shape, and all of this would be drawn and then painted in watercolour. And I do have some of the pieces myself still somewhere in a box. I'd completely forgotten about them until recently, and I remembered this book because it discussed the game itself. I certainly don't have the board, but certainly do have the pieces, and they were really nicely done. Black ink with watercolours, really effective. And then we have other games. Speculate, which is basically a stock market manipulation game. And then another game here, just trying to find the particular page. Ploy, not a game I ever played or saw. All the winds up, as you can hear. And it's a variant, basically, of it's a chess-like variant, basically, where you can see the directions in which the pieces can attack and move are indicated by the lines on the pieces. And confrontation, and again, a game interesting to read about and possibly go back and discover. And last but not least, a short article about Escape from Colditz. That's a game I never had, but I did play quite a bit of it. It was one of my favourite games at the time. I've played it since, and it's huge fun. It's hugely thematic. It's not perfect by any means, but it's got a sense of boys' own adventure, and it's huge fun to play. But anyway, that's Modern Board Games. Interesting book, talking about the board games of the very early 70s. And there are a few here which I kind of admitted I think would have been interesting to include. Perhaps Kingmaker, which would have come out in 1974, and perhaps the other one that would have been interesting to include in this would have been Civilization, but that probably didn't come out at the same time. Anyway, in the meantime, thank you for watching another unboxing in the Nook. If you've enjoyed this, please click the like button down below. Any comments or feedback, I look forward to reading those. And if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, then please do hit that subscribe button, and then you'll know when I'm back in the Nook with some more parcels and a book which I can talk about for about 10 minutes or so, and drink a nice hot cup of tea. Then please hit that subscribe button. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another unboxing in the Nook. Bye for now.